So, picture this. It's a quiet morning out on the calm waters of the Lambert River. A fisherman's just sitting there, minding his own business, when suddenly he hears this clear sound of a woman crying. And then, just a second later, bang! That sharp, familiar crack of a gunshot cuts through the silence. Oh my god, it was so unsettling that everyone around could feel it in their gut. Something terrible had just happened. And yeah, they were right. Not long after, they found the body of 33-year-old Miller. She had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Over the next few hours, days, and even weeks, the twisted story behind Miller's death started to unfold right before the public's eyes. And as more details came out, people began asking some pretty serious questions, especially about her husband, John Paul. But the biggest question of all was still hanging in the air. Was he actually guilty? Today, we're diving deep into the scandalous marriage of a pastor and his tormented wife. A story filled with betrayal, violence, obsession, lies, and, believe it or not, even a ridiculous attempt at what he called resurrection. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. Today we've got a story packed with fraud, betrayal, international fugitives, and some seriously cold-blooded murders. But before we jump in, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and oh yeah, share it with at least one of your friends. If you don't, well, let's just say a bit of bad luck might follow you around for the next 10 days. I'm kidding, or am I? Drop a comment and tell me if you believe in stuff like that. All right, let's get started. So, today we're heading down to South Carolina, to the beautiful city of Myrtle Beach. It's that kind of place where you've got wide, sandy beaches, warm ocean water, and this long, lively boardwalk filled with restaurants, hotels, and all kinds of entertainment. Tourists come here for the surfing, golf, amusement parks, and the wild nightlife. It's this perfect mix of family vacation vibes, shopping, and that chill coastal energy, which is why Myrtle Beach is known as one of the top spots on the East Coast. But, oh my god, nobody in this sunny town could have imagined the dark twist that was about to shake their peace in the spring of 2024. With all the strange turns and contradictions in the case, even people who actually knew the victim couldn't wrap their heads around what really happened. On April 27th, 2024, 55-year-old Johnny Jacobs was out fishing at his usual spot in Lumber River State Park. It was already past noon when he suddenly heard what sounded like crying a woman's voice, sobbing somewhere out in the woods nearby. Unfortunately, from his boat, he couldn't see who it was. The sound was faint and kind of echoing through the trees, but there was no mistaking it. There was a woman out there, and she was in serious distress. A few minutes passed, and then the crying stopped. Everything went silent again, the wind rustling softly through the branches, birds chirping, the gentle murmur of the river. Peace had returned. Until suddenly, bang, that sharp, echoing gunshot shattered the stillness. After checking with the other fishermen, everyone agreed that sound was definitely a gunshot. So Johnny started up his motor and headed toward the spot where he thought it came from. And that's when he saw a backpack lying on the riverbank. When Johnny opened it, he instantly felt a chill run down his spine. Inside were the personal belongings of 30-year-old Micah Miller. Her glasses, phone, keys, bank cards, driver's license, even a small Bible tucked neatly into the side pocket. Within minutes, rescuers arrived on the scene. They began searching the entire area by air, on land, and in the water, looking for a possible body. And by around 4:30 in the afternoon, about an hour and a half after Johnny had heard the gunshot, a group of kayakers spotted a woman's body floating face down in the river. Not long after, authorities confirmed what everyone feared: the items Johnny had found belonged to the same woman pulled from the water. It was Micah. The cause of death was clear: a single gunshot wound to the head. The news spread through town like wildfire, and oh my god, the locals were stunned. Everyone knew Micah as the wife of a well-known local pastor, and most people thought their marriage was picture perfect. She was deeply religious, always kind, warm, and full of life. But what most folks didn't know was that behind that facade of a God-built marriage, there was a dark, painful story waiting to be uncovered. So, let's take a closer look at the relationship between Micah and her husband, John Paul Miller. John Paul Miller was the pastor of Solid Rock Church, pretty popular for his passionate, uplifting sermons. His wife often led the worship through song and praise, and together they seemed like the perfect couple. But those who really knew them, well, they saw the warning signs. People close to Micah always talked about her kind heart and gentle spirit. She was caring, genuine, deeply faithful, and honestly, just stunningly beautiful. Her big, open eyes and warm smile made everyone instantly like her. And her voice, oh my god, it could touch your soul. She had this amazing gift: she could connect with anyone, no matter who they were. Micah was also super involved in her church's youth program. Her whole goal was to create a safe space for teenagers in the Myrtle Beach community. But what most church members didn't realize was that the couple they looked up to, the perfect Christian marriage everyone admired, was actually falling apart behind closed doors. In October 2023, Micah filed for divorce, accusing her husband not just of multiple affairs, but also of emotional, psychological, and even physical abuse. According to her, whenever she tried to stand up to him, he'd threatened to lock her out of the house, forbid her from seeing her family, and even spread rumors about her personal struggles among church members. But here's the thing, October wasn't the first time she'd tried to leave him. Back in January of that same year, things had already hit rock bottom. Micah packed her things and decided to move back to Kansas to live with her family. At first, it honestly seemed like the best decision she could have made. She quickly joined a new church, made friends, started volunteering, and got back into community life. For the first time in a long while, it looked like she was finally healing, but then, after just a few months in Kansas, she suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a strange note and sending a few cryptic goodbye messages. Her friend, Cheyenne French, later talked about one of those messages, one that immediately made her uneasy because it just didn't sound like Micah at all. The message read, "Hey, great news. My husband and I made up and he's letting me come back home. Praise God." That text completely threw Micah's friends and family off. She'd been planning long-term to stay in Kansas. She had church trips lined up, a packed calendar of events, and even a possible new job in the works. It just didn't make any sense that she'd suddenly go back to her old life. To this day, no one really knows why Micah decided to return to Myrtle Beach. But one thing's clear, once she went back, her relationship with her husband picked up right where it left off, as if nothing had ever happened. In the months that followed, Micah began posting on social media about domestic abuse, and a lot of people started realizing that maybe she wasn't speaking in general terms, she was talking about herself. She opened up about being trapped in toxic, dangerous relationships, and if you really paid attention to her videos, oh my God, it became painfully obvious she was living that nightmare firsthand.
You are the bride of Christ. And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you, so you don't have to stay in a abusive relationship. Whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs, or alcohol abuse, or physical abuse, psychological abuse, making you think that this is all your fault, or you're a bad mom, or you're a bad wife, or you're a bad husband, or you're not giving it your all when you know you are. God hates divorce. But why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that?
Things got even darker in February 2024, when Micah was suddenly hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for treatment. And somehow, oh my God, what a coincidence, right after that, all of her divorce paperwork just magically got withdrawn. At first, people thought maybe this would be a good thing for her. I mean, everyone could see how the marriage had taken a serious toll on her mental health, so getting help seemed like the right move. But what no one knew was that her hospitalization wasn't voluntary. Her husband was the one who arranged the whole thing. And as if that wasn't bad enough, while Micah was in the hospital, John Paul emptied their home, packed up most of her belongings, and moved them into storage. To make matters worse, before all this happened, Micah had been collecting evidence and documents to support her divorce case. So when she suddenly changed her mind, yeah, people found that really suspicious. But even that wasn't the end of it. While she was in treatment, every single file from her phone and computer disappeared, completely wiped. No backups, nothing left. So, what was John Paul hiding? When Micah finally got home, she realized she no longer had access to her iCloud, her email, or even her Facebook accounts. All the passwords had been changed. John Paul had also taken her car, claiming that because of her mental state, she wasn't safe driving anymore. So Micah went straight to the police and reported her car as stolen. During questioning, John Paul told officers that his wife had a habit of spending money recklessly, both hers and his. He said he was afraid that if she got her car back, she might sell it just to fund another shopping spree. But since the car was legally considered joint property, police couldn't press any charges against him. The whole thing was just brushed off and closed like it was no big deal. Shocking, right? Only a few weeks after she got out of the hospital, Micah left John Paul again. She packed up, moved out of their house, and went to stay with her sister who lived nearby. Officially, the couple was still trying to work things out, but honestly, that bit of distance was probably the only real peace Micah had felt in a long time. For John Paul though, it was unbearable. Losing control over her completely drove him crazy. Not long after she moved out, he started sending her these nasty, threatening messages. And according to witnesses, things got even scarier. He actually showed up outside her sister's house with a loaded gun, saying he wasn't leaving until Micah came out to talk to him. Of course, her sister did exactly what anyone would do. She called 911 immediately.
He said he's texting her threatening that he's going to kill himself.
Yeah, he said my blood is going to be on your hands. But prior to that, he was threatening to come in here, and he said, call the cops, I don't care, I'm armed and ready.
No one knows for sure what made Micah return home after everything she had been through. One can only imagine the kind of pressure she was under, torn between her loving family and an abusive husband. Her fear, desperation, and emotional exhaustion likely clouded any sense of rational thinking, especially in those moments when he stood outside her door with a weapon in his hands. But the story didn't end there. As their relationship continued to fall apart, Micah began to feel that someone was watching her. In March 2024, twice in a single week, someone slashed all 4 of her car's tires. When she took the car to a Honda dealership for repairs, the mechanic gave her news that made her blood run cold. Inside one of the tires, carefully hidden from plain sight, they found a GPS tracker. Micah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Yes, her husband had always been obsessed with control and acted like a true psychopath, but she never thought he would go that far. Unfortunately, the stalking didn't stop there. That same morning, around 11:30 a.m., while Micah was still at the repair shop, a man approached her, someone she had previously tried to avoid. According to the police report, he was acting aggressively, and Micah pulled out her phone to start recording, but as soon as she hit record, the man quickly ran off, apparently realizing he was about to be exposed.
Walk away.
I'll show you the pictures.
Do you want to go to jail?
They'll be on Facebook in a few hours.
Alrighty, you'll be in jail in a few hours. Walk away.
But that was only one of many incidents. Micah believed she was being followed not just by him, but by other people, possibly ones he had hired to keep tabs on her. She even went to the police, saying she feared for her life, and filed for a restraining order against anyone who might be involved in the stalking. However, opinions were divided. Some thought her fears were merely signs of mental instability connected to her recent treatment, but everyone who truly knew her strongly disagreed. Micah's family insisted that she was mentally strong, determined, and not the kind of person prone to paranoia. John Paul, of course, claimed the opposite. He insisted that Micah wasn't just unstable, but unreliable. He went as far as to say she suffered from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and a dependent personality disorder. But if that were true, if she was really so problematic and unpredictable, then why did John Paul stay married to her? The short answer, because he loved her. He also maintained that when she took her medication, she became gentle and dependable. However, according to him, Micah often refused to take her pills because they caused weight gain and slurred speech. And what about the tracking device? John Paul claimed it was only for her own safety, nothing more. But let's be honest, you don't need to be a genius to see that. Even if John Paul's intentions were pure, the way he handled Micah's mental health was completely wrong. And unfortunately, this wasn't the end of it. The harassment continued into the spring, when John Paul posted a nude photo of his wife on Facebook. Although Micah went to the police to file a report, authorities said there was no way to prove who had uploaded the picture. In the end, no one was held accountable. Meanwhile, Micah desperately sought help from law enforcement. In her mind, if she didn't comply with her husband's demands, he would become violent. And we haven't even mentioned how they met yet. The grim truth is that John Paul reportedly began grooming Micah when she was very young, back in 2010, when they first met through a church youth group. At the time, Micah was just 14 years old. John Paul was 28. Before they officially became a couple, both of them had already been married to other people. The affair between Micah and John Paul led to the breakdown of both previous marriages, and eventually they built a family of their own. Now, back to our timeline. Less than a week after Micah's last visit to the police, she discovered yet another tracking device in her car. This time, she was sure it was her husband's doing. That's it, she said. The next day, on April 27th, 2024, Micah filed for divorce. It was a Saturday, an ordinary spring day in Myrtle Beach. But what happened 30 miles north in a state park would soon shake the entire community. That same day, police in Robeson County received a call about an emergency at Lumber River State Park in North Carolina, about an hour and a half's drive from Myrtle Beach. It was a peaceful spot, usually filled with campers, hikers, swimmers, picnickers, and kayakers. But this time, officers weren't responding to a routine call, not a fight, not an accident, not a drowning. They were heading out to save a woman who, as she told the 911 dispatcher, was planning to take her own life.
Robeson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
Let me see. You don't know where you're at?
And National Park.
What's the phone number you're calling me from? Where's the park located at?
In Bear Bluff. I have my location on, I think, on my phone. Find my phone is on. I just did my my location.
Okay, I'm showing, I don't think you are in Robeson County. Are you at the Lumber River State Park?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Tell me what's, happened.
I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
By the time local police arrived at the scene, it was already too late. Micah was dead. Right after the tragedy, a lot of people started suspecting foul play, especially her family and friends. They all said that, despite her unhappy marriage, Micah was looking toward the future with optimism. She had plans, meetings, church services, trips scheduled for the following month, and even a planned visit to Africa. She had already shipped some of her belongings ahead of time, so the idea that she would take her own life just didn't make sense. And when you add John Paul and all the abuse in their relationship to that equation, well, things start to look very suspicious. So, could it have been him? Before jumping to conclusions, let's take a closer look at what actually happened, because the evidence might change your mind. In the early hours of Saturday, April 27th, Micah was seen leaving her apartment complex caught on her own Ring camera. A little while later, another camera recorded her inside a pawn shop buying a handgun. At 12:34 p.m, traffic cameras captured her driving her black Honda Accord along the highway. She stopped for gas, grabbed a drink at the convenience store, and then kept heading north toward North Carolina. At 2:54 p.m, she arrived at Lumber River State Park. That's when a 911 dispatcher received a call from her. Micah said she was planning to end her life and wanted her family to be able to find her body. About 20 minutes later, police arrived on the scene and began searching. Not long after, a man in fishing gear approached them. He said he'd heard crying coming from the riverbank and then a gunshot. He showed the officers a backpack that belonged to Micah, with all her personal items still inside. At 4:23 p.m, a local kayaker called 911 to report a body floating in the water. Police immediately sealed off the area, and by 6 that evening, the forensic team had arrived, taking photos, collecting evidence, and trying to piece together exactly what had happened. In the parking lot nearby, police found a black Honda Accord, the same car Micah had driven from Myrtle Beach. Inside the vehicle, on the passenger seat, they discovered a gun case, ammunition, and a receipt clearly showing that she was the one who had purchased the firearm. Later that same day, a 9mm handgun was pulled from the river. The serial number matched the one listed on the pawn shop receipt. Both the surveillance footage and the documentation confirmed it beyond any doubt Micah Miller was the buyer. On Monday, May 6th, the chief medical examiner released the official cause of death, suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. By then, the entire Myrtle Beach community had already heard the tragic news. Those who knew Micah personally were shocked and outraged when they learned the official conclusion. To them, it just didn't make sense. Everyone felt there had to be more to this story. Many were convinced that her husband had something to do with her death. Logically, you'd expect John Paul to be devastated after all. He'd just lost his wife, a beautiful woman who was deeply involved in their church community. But to everyone's horror, he showed almost no emotion at all. In the days following the tragedy, he even took the stage at Solid Rock Church to address his congregation and officially announce the news. And yes, grief affects people in different ways, but the way he spoke about his dead wife was frankly shocking.
As Christians, of course, we know she's not here and in heaven, and she's, worshiping and enjoying, and probably hadn't even had time to look down here yet. But I got this lay next to her body and spent time with her body about 4 times this week, and each time it still didn't hit me. I thought she was going to wake up. I even tried to raise her from the dead one time this week, and that morning, actually, I went to the mall later. She had bought me this dog tag, and the chain broke, so I went to the mall to get it fixed. And I saw a female about 20, 30 feet in front of me, and she was wearing one of Micah's dresses, and she had the same tattoo Micah has on her arm and the exact same hair. And out of just instinct, I screamed, "Micah!" And the girl turned around, and it was one of her sisters. And I thought I raised her from the dead. She's alive, But I can't wait to see her again one day.
No wonder people all around the world who watched that video started asking the same question. How could a man who'd just lost his wife act so strangely? You'd expect him to be quiet, reserved, maybe even broken with grief. But clearly, that wasn't the case. His tone, his posture, even his facial expressions, everything felt off. He spoke with an unsettling calmness, sometimes even smiling, and the way he addressed the congregation left viewers uneasy. Before long, behavioral experts began weighing in on the footage.
We're not seeing any grief here. We're not seeing what are called adapters, the things that we use to comfort ourselves, to self-soothe ourselves, like wringing of the hands, those kind of things. He's got what's supposed to be tears happening. That's not happening. He has no tissues there with him. His nose isn't running. He's trying to pretend it is, but it isn't. These are all the classic cues of someone who is faking an emotion. And if you'll notice, if someone's really feeling an emotion, that's what the emotions fire those expressions onto your face, in other words, from your brain, from your limbic system. And those don't last on him. We don't see grief. And the little bit of grief there's a semi-sadness that we see in there is taken away by a smile. And the smile is more prevalent than his grief is, or than his sadness is. This is one of those things that shows so many things that are wrong with it. I'm actually going to use this in training because these are all the classics right here, all of them.
And that was only the beginning of the strange behavior. What followed was even more disturbing, his interactions with other women almost immediately after Micah's death. It was as if he had already erased her from his life. In a local news report, a waitress recalled how he began flirting excessively with her just days after the tragedy. She described him as way too casual, almost cheerful, adding that his demeanor didn't match that of a grieving husband at all. To those who knew the couple, and even to strangers following the story, his behavior felt deeply unsettling.
A waitress in South Carolina shared this receipt with us from a customer she served on February 23rd. Look closely. You see the customer was John Paul Miller, JP Miller, as he's been called. He left that waitress a huge tip, along with his phone number and a smiley face. This was just 2 months before his wife, Micah, filed for divorce. The waitress, who we're referring to only by her first name, Christiana, reached out to John Paul a few days later and had a casual text exchange with him. Afterward, though, she hit the brakes, she says, after some red flags surfaced about him. And then, last week, after Micah killed herself, Christiana reached out to him yet again, not revealing that she'd made the connection between him and his wife. And she was surprised at his response, to say the least. Christiana joins us now. Thanks so much for coming on the show. What did he say?
Well, I asked him if anything was new, and he more or less said, yes, lots new, LOL. I'll text later.
LOL? Laugh out loud.
As public outrage and curiosity about his behavior kept growing, people began digging deeper into John Paul's past and into his relationship with Micah. What they uncovered was alarming. Details from their previous marriages began to surface, painting a disturbing picture of how young and impressionable Micah really was when John first started mentoring her. At the same time, it became clear that while John was portraying Micah as unstable, he himself had a long history of troubling behavior. Back in 2015, one of his neighbors filmed him lying on the ground outside his own home, apparently in the middle of a psychotic episode or under the influence of drugs. The footage, shared online by a user named Ty Longerbeam, quickly went viral. Yet it wasn't the video itself that shocked people most, it was the caption beneath it. The post read, "They say everyone gets what they deserve, and this time, it's literal. You've spent years using and humiliating people, then stood in front of the congregation and publicly shamed your victims, exposing their most private and degrading moments. That's how you control the narrative. And now your wife is dead, and you're claiming it's because she was mentally ill. But the truth is, no one was mentally ill until they met you. This video proves the real problem was you all along. You know exactly what those medications do to someone. Imagine being a vulnerable person, trapped under your control, your manipulation, and your humiliation. So how did Micah's family react to the news of her death? From the very beginning, they were certain there were two sides to the story, the one told by John Paul, and the one Micah would have told if she were still alive. After her death, Micah's sister spoke publicly. She revealed numerous occasions when Micah confided in her about John's controlling, obsessive, and manipulative behavior, and about how afraid she was of him. In fact, according to her family, Micah had said more than once, "If they ever find me with a bullet in my head, it wasn't me, it was John Paul." Given that chilling statement, Micah's family remains convinced her death wasn't a suicide. The woman they knew, strong, compassionate, and full of hope, would never have taken her own life. But John Paul stood firm, He insisted that while their marriage had its challenges, Mika had long struggled with severe mental health issues, and ultimately, she lost that battle. Authorities ruled her death a suicide, but many people, from online investigators to mainstream journalists, refused to believe it. They were certain John Paul had something to do with what happened. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. When emotions run this high, logic often fades into the background. The tension around the case grew so intense that even the fisherman who reported hearing Micah's cries that night became a target of online hate. But the truth is, he was just an innocent man, someone who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Jacobs tells me he'd been fishing for several hours on April 27th at the Lumber River State Park when he heard a faint cry. He says 2 or 3 minutes later, he heard a gunshot.
I want this to stop as far as me. I don't want to make this all about me because I'm still thinking about Michael. I'm trying to respect her family, and I got total respect for them, and I am so sorry for what they're going through. I never thought my day would turn out like that.
I'd already been by the river for a few hours, Jacob said, and then I suddenly heard a faint scream. 2 or 3 minutes later, there was a gunshot. I just want this to stop. I don't want the story to revolve around me. I still think about Mika. I'm trying to honor her memory and her family. I truly respect them, and I'm deeply sorry for everything they've had to go through. I could never have imagined my day turning out like this. But it wasn't just the online community that believed John Paul was responsible for Micah's death. Even the Myrtle Beach congregation that once adored their pastor began to turn against him. People gathered outside his church in protest dressed in purple. They held signs reading "Justice for Micah" and "End the silence on domestic violence." Despite the growing pressure, John Paul continued to insist on his innocence. He gave dozens of interviews and even spoke with people on TikTok, sharing his own version of what happened. And although the case remains unresolved, as of the 29th of July 2024, John Paul and Micah's family reached a settlement agreement intended to bring all legal disputes to an end. The terms of the settlement have not been disclosed, but attorneys for both parties confirmed that it was meant to resolve all matters pending in probate and family court involving John Paul Miller, his church Solid Rock, and the estate of Micah Miller. Despite disappointment among the Myrtle Beach community, online users, and Micah's relatives, the family's attorney stated, "We don't want the Francis family or anyone else to go through years of litigation. We want to move on and turn the page. And when we say we've achieved justice for Micah, we truly mean it." Later, a local news broadcast reported,
Solid Rock Church pastor John Paul Miller and his late wife's family came to an agreement today to end all legal disputes.
Micah Miller died by suicide at Lumber River State Park on April 27, 2 days after she filed for divorce. News 13's Adriana Lawrence joins us live outside the courthouse in Conway. And Adriana, how did both sides come to this agreement?
Well, Trish, Edward, not only did they come to that agreement you spoke about, but the family decided to withdraw their request to become a special administrator over Micah's estate. They say this is justice for Micah. Both John Paul, Micah's family, and their lawyers met during a probate hearing today after John Paul filed a motion to have Micah's sister Sierra removed as special administrator. In about 20 minutes, both parties agreed to withdraw that request. Regina Ward, attorney for Micah's family, and Russell Long for John Paul say the families want to set their differences aside and honor Micah. Ward says the focus is now Micah's law to strengthen protections for victims of abuse across South Carolina.
Pray for those who curse you. Bless those who curse you. Speak well of those who are not speaking well over you, because it's all going to work out.
Unfortunately, the true circumstances surrounding Micah Miller's death remain a mystery, and perhaps we may never know what really happened that night. But one thing is certain in life: Micah was a kind, compassionate, and deeply faithful woman who cared deeply for those around her. As for John Paul, well, that's something each of us has to decide for ourselves. What happens next? For now, it's unclear. But the creator promises to pin a comment with ongoing updates for those who wish to follow the case as it continues to unfold. The ending of this story is a little different from what we usually see, yet it remains an incredibly fascinating case nonetheless. I suppose it all depends on whether you believe someone has to physically pull the trigger to be responsible for another person's death. Some might say that, in a way, he'd been pulling the trigger for years, long before that tragic night. So, what do you think about this story? Do you believe John Paul bears any responsibility for what happened? Or was it entirely in Micah Miller's hands? As always, share your thoughts in the comments below. And with that, I think we'll end today's video here. Thank you all for watching. I hope you found it interesting. Take care and see you next time.